We don't do feeling circles. We don't cry in briefing rooms. And we definitely do not fall backward and hope someone behind us will catch us.
Man, that is a hell of a way to open a discussion on public safety training. It really hits you right in the chest.
It does. But it's honest, right? It tackles the elephant in the room immediately.
Yeah.
Because if you pick up a dossier on emotional intelligence in public safety, so police, fire, EMS, the knee-jerk reaction from anyone in a uniform is going to be, okay, here comes the HR seminar.
Right, here come the trust falls.
Exactly.
The skepticism is totally baked in, and frankly, it's earned, because for decades, training has been entirely binary. You've got the hard skills, triage, fire behavior, exactly. And then you have the soft skills, which usually get treated as the stuff you do when you aren't doing real police work or real firefighting. It's seen as a nice to have, not a need to have.
Yeah, but the source material we are taking a deep dive into today, specifically this breakdown on the tactical application of emotional intelligence, or EI, it flips that completely on its head.
It really does.
It argues that this distinction between hard and soft skills is actually getting people killed. This isn't about being polite. It's about being effective.
And it doesn't use flowery language to say it either. The core argument here is that emotional regulation is a mechanical, biological requirement for operating in a high-threat environment. If you cannot regulate your own nervous system, you are physically incapable of reading a scene correctly. You're just functionally blind.
So let's clear the deck on definitions early on for everyone listening, because if we don't, we're going to lose the listeners who think we're about to discuss finding your joy on the patrol beat or something.
Yeah, you don't want that.
So how does this material actually define emotional intelligence in a purely tactical context?
It strips away all the fluff. It defines it simply as the pause between impulse and action.
The pause.
That split second. Just think about it mechanically. Something happens out in the field. A suspect lurches, a beam cracks in a fire, a family member screams. Your brain receives that data. The impulse is the biological reptilian reaction. Fight, flight, freeze. But the action is what you actually end up doing. Emotional intelligence is just the software that runs in that gap between the two.
So it's literally the difference between a reflex and a conscious decision.
Precisely. The text actually calls it scene safety for the mind. Which I just love that framing. Every responder knows you don't run into a burning structure without checking the integrity of the floor.
Of course.
But we constantly send people into high-stress interactions without checking the integrity of their own decision-making loop.
That is such a vivid image. Scene safety for the mind. And there's a framework in here that I think connects the dots perfectly for folks who live and die by structure. The Internal Incident Command System.
Oh yeah, this is the big takeaway right here. If you work in public safety, you know ICS. The Incident Command System. It's the Bible for managing chaos.
You've got an incident commander, you've got operations, logistics, planning.
Exactly. It organizes the external world so you don't get completely overwhelmed.
It's how you manage a hurricane or a riot without the whole thing collapsing into total anarchy.
Right, but the argument our sources make is that you need to run that exact same org chart inside your own head. Because what happens when the external scene is chaotic? You lean on the system. But what happens when you are chaotic?
When the internal system breaks down.
Exactly. If your internal incident commander, basically your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, goes offline because you're flooded with cortisol, the rest of the system fails. You can't handle logistics, which is your personal energy and resources.
And you can't handle operations, which are your actual tactics.
You're just reacting.
So you're saying that without that internal command established first, the external command is basically a house of cards.
It creates a vacuum. If you aren't leading yourself, the chaos of the scene just starts leading you.
There is a brutal example of this in the reading that really drives it home. It's a personal account from a supervisor at a double homicide. And this wasn't some sterile crime scene where everything is taped off and perfectly quiet.
No, this was fresh. The details in the text are really visceral. The supervisor describes the smell of iron in the air from the blood. The bodies are still in situ. The deputies have just cleared the house, so it's this massive sensory overload.
Visual trauma, olfactory trauma.
Yeah, and then the variable that you absolutely cannot control shows up. The family.
And that's the real friction point, isn't it?
Yeah.
You train to clear the house. You train to tape the perimeter, but do you actually train for the mother of the victim screaming at the yellow tape while the blood is literally still wet inside?
Most don't. And the supervisor admits in the text his body did what bodies do. His heart rate spiked, his vision narrowed, he felt the physical heat rising in his neck. He was primed for a fight.
Because that's the biological impulse. The amygdala sees a screaming person and says threat.
Right, and if he acts on that reflex, he yells at the mother. He gets aggressive. He escalates the trauma.
He becomes part of the problem. But he ran that internal ICS.
He engaged the pause. He recognized, okay, I am physiologically ramping up right now. And he consciously slowed his breathing. He lowered his volume, which is actually a really counterintuitive move when someone is screaming at you.
Yeah, your instinct is to match them.
Exactly. But he didn't. He treated the family as if they were his own, and the result wasn't just that he was being nice.
That's the key right there. I really want to underline that for everyone listening. It wasn't about being nice. It was a tactical decision.
It was purely operational control.
Right.
Because he studied himself, he studied the family. And because the family calmed down, the deputies could actually focus on the scene rather than doing crowd control.
Wow.
His emotional regulation acted as a force multiplier for the entire unit. He bought his team time and space to work just by controlling his own voice.
That is such a powerful example of it working. But on the flip side, we have to talk about what happens when this mechanism breaks, when that internal command fails entirely. The sources cite the station fire in Los Angeles back in 2009. This isn't just a bad call. This is a massive case study in the consequences of emotional failure.
It is tragic. And we need to be really careful here. We aren't bashing the responders who were there. They were in absolute hell. But the post-incident analysis, which is backed by research from Stevenson and colleagues, points to something called acute stress interference.
Which is basically a polite academic way of saying your brain stops processing reality correctly.
Pretty much. The station fire was a perfect storm. You had arson, rugged terrain, extreme heat. The stress load was just off the charts. And what the research shows is that when stress hits that red line, the brain physically blocks cues.
Like what kind of cues?
You literally stop hearing things. You stop seeing peripheral details. Responders talk faster. They miss vital radio traffic. You start constructing a version of reality that matches your internal stress, not the actual fire in front of you.
The report mentioned information silos forming, which really stuck out to me. Usually when we hear about silos in government or public safety, we assume it's because agencies don't like each other, or the radios don't work, or someone's hoarding data. But this suggests the silos were a biological defense mechanism.
That's the scariest part. When human beings are overwhelmed, we retreat to what we know. We retreat to our lane. So the police focused only on traffic. Fire focused only on the flames.
So the coordination, the one thing that actually saves lives in a complex disaster, just crumbled.
Exactly. Not because they didn't have a unified command structure on paper, they did.
But the people in the boxes on the organizational chart were in survival mode.
Correct. The result was delayed evacuation decisions and poor information sharing. Tragically, 2 firefighters lost their lives. Hundreds of structures burned. The takeaway isn't that they were bad leaders, it's that even the best organizational structure cannot compensate for a biological system that is in emotional overload.
If the CPU overheats, the software crashes. Which brings us to this concept of integration friction. We see this all the time. Police, fire, EMS, all rolling up to the exact same mess. On paper, they're on the same team, but in reality.
In reality, they are often operating in completely different mental states.
Yeah.
You have police who are trained to hunt and contain. Their posture is inherently defensive and suspicious. Then you have fire, trained to attack and mitigate. And you have EMS, trained to nurture and treat.
Right.
You put those 3 distinct energies in a tight space, under massive pressure, and you get friction.
It's almost like a language barrier, but an emotional one. One guy's looking for a shooter, the other guy's looking for a hydrant, and the third is looking for a vein.
And if they aren't reading each other, friction. One agency feels sidelined, or maybe a cop speaks sharply to a paramedic because he's in a threat mindset, and suddenly that paramedic shuts down. Now you have a communication blackout, and nobody even touched a radio dial?
Speaking of radios, I really want to highlight the section on dispatchers. I feel like in every deep dive on public safety we do, dispatch gets maybe a paragraph if they're lucky. But here, they are framed as the first point of integration.
They are the gatekeepers. The text makes a really profound point. Dispatchers hear the panic before anyone actually sees it. They are injecting the emotional tone into the response before a single wheel turns.
So if the dispatcher sounds like they're losing it,
that anxiety travels straight over the airwaves. It is viral. If a dispatcher's voice is pitched up, frantic, talking fast, every single cop driving to that scene just had their cortisol spike by 20%.
wow.
They arrive on scene already ramped up. But a dispatcher who is calm, low tone, steady, they can ground 20 responding units just by the cadence of their voice. That is operational EI in action. It's controlling the tempo of the entire game right from the headset.
We actually have some specific wins in the text examples where this worked on the ground. The one that hit me was the police sergeant during that overdose surge. This feels like a situation that could have gone sideways so easily.
Yeah, this is an absolute masterclass in simplicity. We've got a chaotic scene, bodies dropping, EMS running ragged, crowds gathering around. The cops are tense, the medics are totally overwhelmed.
And Sergeant could have started shouting orders.
Right, he could have tried to physically dominate the space, which is very often the default setting for law enforcement in chaos.
But instead, he asks one question. 7 words.
What do you need from us right now? He literally walked up to an EMT and just asked that.
It seems so basic. Why is that revolutionary in this context?
Look at the subtext of those words. That question signals, I see you, I respect your role here, I am here to support, not to dictate. It instantly diffused the interagency tension. The EMTs felt backed up, not bossed around.
It changed the tone from crowding to support.
Exactly. The dynamic shifted from stay out of my way to let's solve this together. It's just an incredible efficiency hack.
There was also the fire captain at the multi-vehicle crash. Absolute cacophony, sirens blaring, people screaming, metal on metal. And her move wasn't to yell louder than the noise.
No, she went the exact opposite direction. She deliberately slowed her speech. She forced her entire crew to downshift. This works because of what neuroscience calls mirror neurons.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
If a leader is frantic, the team will subconsciously mirror that panic. If the leader is deliberately slow and methodical, the team actually has to slow down to match that frequency just to understand the orders. She regulated the entire chaotic environment just by regulating herself.
The text also mentions a patrol officer managing an angry driver just by lowering his own volume and slowing the interaction, which led to compliance. It's effective, but it takes so much discipline. It's completely counterintuitive to slow down when the world around you is speeding up.
That's exactly why it is a skill, not a personality trait. You have to train for it. It has to become muscle memory, just like a reload drill.
Well, before we get to the training, because I know we have that 5-minute check-in to cover, we have to look at the long-term damage of ignoring this stuff. The source uses a metaphor I think everyone can relate to, the engine running with no fuel.
Burnout, the silent operational killer.
Yeah. There's an anecdote about a burglary detective that I think is going to sting for a lot of listeners.
Yeah.
It really highlights the difference between getting the job done and destroying your people in the process.
This one is painful because we have all seen it, or we've all been him at some point. You have a detective working a string of burglaries. He is grinding. Weeks of surveillance, no sleep, living on caffeine and bad food. He is running on fumes.
Right.
He finally cracks the case, solves it, and walks into the office. He's expecting a nod, a handshake, maybe just a go get some sleep.
And the supervisor's response is not great job.
No. The supervisor pulls him aside and says, you have the potential to be a good detective, so get your head out of your ass.
Man, that is brutal.
It cuts really deep. And here's the thing. The detective solves the case. From a pure metric standpoint, the job got done. The supervisor might even think, see, I rode him hard and he delivered. That's the old school mentality. Pressure makes diamonds.
But what is the actual cost?
The cost is what we call emotional blindness. That detective noted in the account that the resentment from that single comment lasted for decades.
Decades.
You might get the case solved today, but you have destroyed that officer's willingness to go the extra mile tomorrow. You turn a highly motivated investigator into a punch-the-clock employee. Or even worse, he eventually becomes a supervisor himself and perpetuates that exact same toxic tough love style because that's what was modeled for him.
It creates a lineage of burnout, just passing the trauma down the line.
Exactly. It's institutional decay. And you cannot budget for that kind of loss.
Okay, so we know the stakes. We know it works when we do it, and we know it destroys teams when we don't. The big question is, how do we actually apply it? You can't just tell a beat cop, hey, have more emotional intelligence. That's about as useful as telling someone to be taller.
Right. That's completely useless advice. You need a procedure. You need a tactic. The source material provided this great infographic called the 5-minute EI check-in for responders. I love this because it treats your brain like a piece of gear that needs a safety check.
Let's walk through it.
Yeah.
Step 1 is simply breath.
And I know eyes are rolling out there. Just breathe. We aren't doing yoga here. But the science is irrefutable. When you are stressed, you take shallow breaths. This signals your brain that you are dying. Taking 2 to 3 slow, deep breaths mechanically forces the parasympathetic nervous system to engage.
It regulates the emotional response.
Exactly. It reoxygenates the prefrontal cortex. You literally cannot make a complex tactical decision if your brain is starving for oxygen. It's not spiritual, it is biological hacking.
So it's fueling the engine. Step 2 is notice your emotional state.
This is the self-audit. It's taking 3 seconds to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Am I angry? Am I hungry? Am I exhausted?
Why does naming it actually matter, though?
Because of affect labeling. The moment you name an emotion saying, I am frustrated, its power over you diminishes. If you don't name it, it dries the car. If you know you are irritable because you haven't eaten in 12 hours, you can check that impulse before you snap at a rookie or a victim. It prevents maladaptive reactions. It keeps you from making a permanent mistake based on a temporary feeling.
Step 3, read the room.
Now you switch from internal to external. You've regulated yourself. Now scan the data. Look at your partner's hands. Are they clenching? Look at the crowd. Listen to the tone of voice. This is where you gather the intel you need to act. You're assessing the emotional terrain. Social awareness.
Step 4, choose words with intention.
This goes right back to the fire captain at the crash. Don't just vomit words. Decide the tone you need. Do you need to be commanding? Do you need to be soothing? Speak clearly. Avoid reactive responses. Your voice is a tool. Use it like you use a baton or stethoscope with precision. Don't let your stress choose your words for you.
And the final step, which I think honestly gets skipped the most,
Yeah.
reset between scenes.
Crucial. It prevents the bleed over effect.
Right.
Say you finish a call involving a dead child. It's horrific. 10 minutes later, you get a call for a noise complaint. If you haven't taken that moment to flush the system, grab some water, stretch you are bringing the ghost of that dead child to the noise complaint. That is how officers end up overreacting to minor offenses. They are reacting to the trauma of the previous call. Emotional carryover.
It prevents the accumulation of toxicity. But honestly, it seems like a lot to remember when the radio is screaming and you're driving 90 miles an hour.
That is exactly why the source argues for training it. You don't learn to shoot by reading a PowerPoint. You go to the range. We need EI ranges.
The text mentions emotional simulations. So this isn't just standard role play.
No, standard roleplay is usually, okay, pretend to arrest him. Emotional simulation means putting the officer in a scenario where actors are screaming at them, insulting them, getting right in their face. Virtual environments can do this too. And you don't grade them on their tactical positioning. You grade them on their regulation.
Did they spike?
Didn't they yell back? Did they lose their... You have to physically inoculate them to the stress.
That is a huge shift in training philosophy.
It is. It's moving from can you control the suspect to can you control yourself? Because if you can't do the second one, you will never do the first one effectively.
They also mentioned buddy checks as a training method.
It's a low barrier to entry, just normalizing the conversation. After a hairy call, asking your partner simple questions like, hey, what almost threw you off back there? It stops us from burying the stress. It makes admitting that you were rattled a part of the standard debrief, not a sign of weakness.
And then getting different agencies in the same room before the disaster happens. Cross-agency debriefs.
Yes. Learning how other agencies operate under strain to build trust before the emergency. Let the cops hear what the paramedics deal with. Let the firefighters hear what dispatch deals with. It builds empathy. And empathy, in a tactical sense, is just better data. If I know what you're up against, I can work with you better.
It really feels like we are at a turning point in how we view public safety.
I think so. We are moving away from the RoboCop era where feelings are seen as a liability. We're finally accepting that the human operator is a biological system. You cannot ignore the biology and expect the mission to succeed.
It comes back to that line. You cannot control the storm if you are part of the storm.
That is the bottom line. If you are chaotic inside, you are just adding to the chaos outside. Emotional intelligence is not a personality trait. It is a buildable operational skill. It's the difference between reacting on instinct and responding with intention.
And this isn't just for the first responders listening. This is for everyone. Whether you're in public safety, corporate boardrooms, parenting, or just sitting in a traffic jam. The ability to regulate oneself is the absolute prerequisite for leading others.
Absolutely. The mechanics are exactly the same whether you are holding a Glock, a scalpel, or a laser pointer.
We're going to leave you with this final thought to mull over or explore on your own. As a society and as agencies, we spend millions of dollars and thousands of hours training for the what-ifs. The active shooters, the earthquakes, the hazmat spills. We optimize our gear, our vehicles, our response times. But if we aren't training for how we react when we are exhausted, overwhelmed, and at our absolute breaking point, are we actually ready for the call?
That is the question every chief, captain, and sergeant needs to answer.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. Check your gear, check your head, and we'll catch you on the next one.